Hello and welcome to Junkyard Studios. As previously talked about in another episode, I'm going to cover my scratch build Leslie. I used a couple of parts. I kind of cheated a little bit, but that's okay because it was pretty cheap. I built it into a 16 space rack, as you can see here, and I just kind of jigged out some squares and put some speaker grill in there on both the top and the bottom. I heard that this might change the sound because the original cabinets had more of a louver. It wasn't really an open grill like that. It was like a louvered slot into the side of the cabinet. For me, I didn't notice a whole lot of difference. I thought I'd go the whole length and actually put like adjustable floor vents in there so you'd still get the louver and you could send the sound traveling down more. Once I turned it on and played with it, I really didn't see much of a point. So inside here we have the upper rotor. I just purchased the upper rotor by itself on this plank. I didn't have to do any measurements on that. I was pretty excited about that. I was scared of messing that up. But it was already done for me, and I kind of braced it with some scrap wood I had hanging around. Everybody knows how much I like scrap wood. And I kind of just put it right into the old holes from the rack rails that were in here. I pulled all the rack rails. I wasn't going to need them. Here's the upper fast and slow motors. I'm trying to wire in here and keep everything nice and neat has been a challenge, as you can see. And I did the best I could. I'm probably gonna have to come back in here and kind of move some stuff around because that could honestly be some of the noise we're hearing. I honestly think what we're hearing is 60 cycle from some bad caps or something like that. I just kind of used what I had on hand for a crossover, and this was originally yanked out of a speaker cabinet. It was close enough, I would say. It was definitely close enough for my particular needs. When I plugged it in, it got there. It's not the best. It might be part of the noise as well. So that's something that we could look at. I was going to today change out these capacitors. I had the correct value. They're 10 UF at 100 volt, but there's a little NP on them, meaning non-polar. All I have is polarized electrolytics. My other question that I had, and I looked online a little bit, was why they were using non-polar electrolytics when in a lot of the old Leslies I've seen they used like orange drops, like polycaps. I didn't have any polycaps in that value either, so probably might not be able to cover that today. Underneath this bucket is my 12-inch speaker. This had to be drilled out for a 12-inch. It was like an 8. And I believe I used my Dremel with the hole saw attachment and got a 12-inch hole out of there, which created some issues with the speaker and that center piece for the lower rotor over here. So there's a center piece in the middle here that goes right about where the speaker cone would be. So I had to elevate the speaker on all 4 connecting points with some shims. It's not the best looking thing in the world, but it works. And we can, if I really feel like it, I can get in there and make it look better. The heart and the soul of this whole unit is this little box here. And this is a control unit made by Dr. Fish Sticks. He does a lot of organ contraptions, and he does a really good job. They're built very well, and it allowed me to build this Leslie and not use the Leslie tube amp. I'm not against using the Leslie tube amp, I just didn't have it. Those Leslie tube amps sound awesome. I probably still would like to have the ability to switch them in and out, but I would have used it if I had it, and I don't. It has a 1/4-inch output here, which I wired to a stereo jack and a speaker cup. I guess the correct term for that would be TRS. Doesn't necessarily have to be used for stereo. I just call them stereo out of habit. And then I wired that down to my little foot switch here. And this was also found just in a basement, just kind of rotting away. It ended up being okay with the switches. The switches are okay. It's I think it's originally from a small Fender amplifier or something similar, or it was, you know, some kind of a knockoff. Not 100% sure because I found it by itself. I shielded the cavity a little bit, just in case noise was going to get in there. And in here, the wiring was pretty much already done for me. The grounding was run all the way around. So I just put my ground on, put my cold lead to this switch, and my hot lead over to this switch. I'm not sure it makes much of a difference how you wire it. I think it would just change the controls around, because each control has its own lead. So it would probably just switch what this does over to here. As far as I know, if anybody can correct me on that, feel free to leave a comment. So in a little bit, I'm going to clean up this wiring kind of like I started doing down here, and get all these power wires over to here, and all this audio wire over that way. And I'll give you some photos of it. I'm going to use my zip ties, and I've collected these cable, different size cable fixtures to kind of tuck stuff out of the way on my builds. You'll find them in all kinds of things. They're excellent to have around. But first, I think we'll let you hear it and then see if moving cables changes anything. To start us off here, here's the slow speed. That bottom rotor, sometimes I gotta give it a little bit of a push. I still have to investigate that. I think some of the rubber components or the spring that's involved with that are burning out. So that reel-to-reel amplifier has two different inputs, and this is it's the microphone input, but it's a 1/4-inch jack. I believe that it was intended for guitar signal, and that's the noise I'm talking about. That's actually not that bad. But it is present. But on this other input, it's nice and clean. But the volume's pretty low, and you can't really hear it. And that's all the way up. Go back to the microphone. Turn it down a little, it was distorting. Cat wants to go in there and play. So you can kind of hear that effect going on. I'm going to turn that down a little more. start, and this should be fast. When it speeds up, the noise kind of goes away, and you can fiddle with the volume and make it not as noticeable, but it's still a pain. I'd like to get rid of it. I'm gonna try some things, see what we can come up with. I cleaned up a lot of the wiring. I stuck all the control and motor stuff kind of over here. Whoa. I wanted to test that real fast to show you that noise is still there. I'm sure you can hear it. Bring it to you. It's not coming in on here. I unplugged it. Nothing changed. You could sit here and unplug all of these and nothing changes. That kind of tells me that it's originating from that amplifier. It's still not that bad, but I'd still like to get rid of it. Alright, this is a known clean amplifier on our other systems, and if you watched my other video on the Hammond scanner, we used and demoed this same amplifier, and it was whisper silent on the speaker, not on the Hammond scanner, but that was because the Hammond scanner itself has some noise issues related with it. So even with this amplifier, we still get that noise. It's maybe a couple of decibels less, and that's because this amplifier has fresh caps in it, and it's probably one of the quietest amplifiers I have. But that noise is still there. So for that noise to be across two amplifiers, that should be triggering everyone's troubleshooting. That almost tells me that there's a problem back in here somewhere. Something isn't grounded. Something's catching the lights, the interference from the lights. We'll have to investigate. Alright, all of the lights have been turned off for the room. The lights in my studio have been notoriously a problem, and I've done some things to kind of fix them. I think part of it is the dimmer switch that's in there. Those things are just notoriously noisy, and I think they wired in AC lights with a like a DC dimmer kind of a thing. Like, it works, sort of. Some lights go out. It wasn't the best install. It was just bare Romex up there as well. So what I did, between each can, you can see those cans. My ceiling isn't finished right now. I was in the middle of doing that when some of this crisis happened, and I'll get around to finishing it. That's a story for another time. In between those cans was just bare Romex with 120 hanging out on it. That's up to code, but that's a lot of pathway for interference. Just nothing shielding it. So what I did is I put flex in between there with the Romex so that it's grounded from can to can back to my light switch, and that helped. I think it shielded it a little bit. There's still some noise, because this This amp's on, all the lights are off, and the only noise that I actually heard was the input sitting on the ground. That's dead silent. There might be nothing wrong with my amplifier or the Leslie. Now, I'll bring you over to the light switch. Turn the lights on. And that interference has returned. It's still really not too bad. It bugs me, and it kind of goes away when it plays. So now the question is, where do we go from here? There's really only two options. You either fix the lighting, which I've been working on. I probably won't be able to do too much with that right now. Or you find a way to shield the entire Leslie, which seems outrageous. And I don't know that it would 100% work because of those speaker grills all around each side. If you grounded those to the shield that you built into here, and it's already got some metal, so you wouldn't have to do a whole lot of shielding. It'd mostly be all the wood pieces, because that's not going to do anything to stop interference. That really could work. It'd be way easier with shielding paint. But then the argument goes towards the old Leslies. I don't remember them ever being shielded. I don't really ever remember them being all that noisy. I mean, they had a tube amp in them, so there was inherent noise with that. But it wasn't the kind of noise that I'm experiencing. I don't believe. All of the wiring, other than the speaker cables, which don't need shielding, is shielded. So there's probably not a gain to be made there. I think that shielding the unit is probably the best idea. I would look at the amplifier because that's wide open and that's only in a wood case, but the other amplifier that we thought was the issue is completely encased in metal and also has the same kind of speaker shielding stuff on the back. So that would present the same issue over here with the Leslie. While we're contemplating our noise issue and how to handle it, something I noticed from the video was there's a noise coming from the upper rotor. You can hear that right there. That's not the noise we were experiencing before, and what I think that is I need to oil that bearing. I did it when I first got it. I first got this upper rotor 5 to 6 years ago. This project took me a long time to build. So I wanted to kind of show you oiling that bearing. I've always used Singer sewing machine oil because trying to get a hold of the original Hammond oil is pretty difficult. I've heard a lot of people talk about only using the Hammond oil, and that's safe. You know, I'm not saying you shouldn't, but I've used Singer oil as long as I knew that I could, and that's probably been 4, 5, 6 years now, and I use it on everything. I use it on motors. I used it on the Hammond scanner. I've never experienced a problem. So the way I've been told to do this is you just oil here. Let it fill up once. It'll go down. And do it again. Give it a little more. And twice ought to take care of it. We'll let that sit for a minute. Another project that I actually forgot about, I found it on the tech bench, was I have this Leslie switch. And I think it's already wired. The only problem is the bottom cover broke, but I have a piece that I've been shaping, out of Lexan, one of my favorite materials, because it's nice and easy to work with. It looks good. Lexan's just a fancy word for plastic. So we're going to shape that, see if we can fix that. It's already wired over here. As you can see, that cable is pretty nasty. But that leads me to cable training. If you roll up all of your cables with the over-under method, it doesn't matter how nasty they started. This particular cable I've been training. I call it training. You can train a cable to eventually go to this shape. This cable was in a scrap bin, and it looked just as bad as that one not long ago. One of the first things I do is I take the cable and I unravel it. I have one over here that I will show you. That was it was taped in kind of a bundle, and I just kind of let them hang out for a couple of months, just draped over something, stretch them out for a couple of months, and then after they've sat out long enough, do the over-under method, coil it up, let it sit for another couple of months coiled up, and just repeat that pattern until eventually your cables are trained and look like this. And they're a lot easier to handle that way. It's much nicer. I highly suggest doing that. I'm going to give it a couple of spins, kind of let that oil go around. I don't want to turn it on and have that oil go flying all over the place. When I first got this, I had to clean it up quite a bit. It was covered. And it was covered in oil, which is good, because that means that somebody actually oiled it that whole time. So it was a little dirty, not a big deal, but at least somebody had been taking care of it, and there was evidence of that. Another thing that I will oil that I see now is this bearing right here. I don't see a whole lot of videos covering oiling that bearing, but it's still a moving part of the assembly. It certainly needs oil, just like everything else. This motor over here will also need it, and this motor as well. At the top of these motors there's like a copper bearing, and those kind of go dry and make some noise as well. This is going to be kind of difficult with the spout I have. I'll throw a little bit in there, get that working. Just kind of give it a couple of spins there, let it work in. This is going to be hard for me to film this motor and actually oil it. So let me see what I got here. That'll be okay. It'll be okay if it some of it kind of gets around there. I wouldn't worry about it too much. I wouldn't saturate any part of these. Okay, let's turn it on. The noise is still there. Yeah, that noise is pretty much still there. That's upsetting. I thought that would be like a mechanical noise. I don't think it is. Alright, so poking around, I think I found our noise. It's that vent. That vent isn't tight enough to the case, and the vibrations are creating the noise. Because when I press on it, it goes away. I do have a solution for that. I can take that apart and I can dampen the grill, or just tighten the screws. So my temporary solution, I put washers on this end. On the grill end, I have a lock washer underneath the grill to keep it from moving around a bunch. A nut in there. Get my light. This light came from the Goodwill, if you couldn't tell. It's like a barbecue light. I use it all the time. It was completely worth the $2 I spent. I put a lock nut on the other side of the grill and a wing nut on top of that to keep the pressure. Kind of overkill, and I might not stick with that. Eventually, I'd like to get some rubber washers in between there, and then I probably won't have to have all that there. So, you can hear it's not making that noise anymore, which is good. It is making a small amount of noise from this. You can hear it. Now, because this thing vibrates so much when it gets going, you're gonna end up dealing with some noise. But this piece just kind of rests on top of this shelf here. When I was creating it, I made it so that I could undo some of these bolts and pull the unit out and service it if need be. And that's always been my goal, is being able to service whatever I build. So the way we would solve that, and I'll see if I have any material hanging around, is we'd put a piece of dampening rubber or cloth underneath this deck, and that'll probably reduce that noise greatly. One of the big things I did not mention about the Dr. Fish Sticks box is it allowed me to create this so small. It allowed me to fit everything into this 16 space rack, which otherwise I would not have. As you can see, there's no space for an amplifier to sit anywhere. This thing has used all available space. I mean, you might be able to fit a d.i.y box in here. That's about it. I'm going to end part 1 of this Leslie video right now. I've been trying to keep each of these videos at about a half hour, partially for my computer. You know, trying to handle anything more than a half hour. I mean, my computer's decent But it takes about an hour for a half-hour video to transfer. I don't want to go too much further. It's easier just to split them into half-hour segments. Plus, having you sit through half-hour, more than a half hour is kind of rough, I suppose. It's easier to break it into 2 videos. What I plan to do with this second video is, I think we got some of the mechanical noise out of the way after poking around. I'd like to get rid of some more of the mechanical noise that I'm seeing. It's pretty low right now. Fix up that switch and maybe take a look at the amplifier. I don't think it's capacitors anymore. I think it's just EMF, noise coming into the amplifier through the back. But what's weird about that is, in the other video you can see it, you can hear it. In the Hammond scanner video, when that same amplifier is literally 6 feet across the room, there's none of that noise. It's all gone. So I'm going to start on part 2 now. I've got another video in the works with the Hammond scanner, so I'm going to be kind of dividing my time between those 2. Keep an eye out for those videos coming up in the future. Also, take a look at my blog. I put that in the description. That's I'm going to try and put more information over there that I couldn't put into the video, because I don't want to blow up the description with 1,000 links and schematics and things like that. I'm probably going to be limited with what I can post over there, because some of the stuff that I find other people have already posted on their website. I don't want to detract attention from them. I found their websites. I got some information off of them. I'd certainly like other people to find their websites and get the information from that. So the blog's going to kind of cover a lot of that. And thanks for watching, and keep an eye out for these upcoming videos.